It was Ellen Stanton that suggested that I contact Anne Ashby as she thought a story on the fine Cornwallis son, Allen's Major, might be of interest. Although Gerald has passed away, his wife Anne and their daughter tell this story of a horse and what he meant to their family with great love and pride. I was fortunate to spend a lovely day with Anne and her daughter Donna Ashby Babbitt, and after hours of good conversation, the scrapbooks came out and back we went in time. The content that follows is a result of our visit, and you'll be able to hear firsthand how Allen's Major came to live with them, his importance to their family, and how he put his stamp on future generations of fine Morgan horses. It was a thrill to learn more about this wonderful New York bred Morgan, and I hope that you enjoy this profile. As a youth, Jerry and his brother Bob spent time at Indian Springs Farm in Baldwinsville, New York, the home of Cornwallis. They would travel from their home in Camillus and admire the fine Morgans. In the following video clip, Anne shares with us her comments about his time there as a youth, and you'll also be treated to actual film of the Indian Springs horses.
Jerry had visited him when he was young. He used to ride ponies over there, or drive them actually. He had a team of ponies that he drove when he got, after he was 11 years old. He was too big to ride them, so they became his driving horses. But he just used to visit the farm and liked the horses and remembered Cornwallis. He told about the stall he was in. He just said he looked so big that, but I guess he actually wasn't that big compared to today's horses, but so I had it. He was a horse that you couldn't help but notice, and you see it in the bloodlines and down through, too.
Allen's Major was out of Nubbin by Cornwallis, and he was just a weanling in 1943 when Jerry's father, Bill Ashby, partnered with son Bob and George Merritt to purchase this up-headed foal for $600. Next, you'll be able to view actual footage of Mrs. Allen lunging what we believe to be a very young Allen's Major.
His
And
father
his
and
brother.
Yes.
Tell me about their acquiring Allen's Major.
Well, the boys had decided they wanted a Morgan. And of course, Jerry was in the service at the time. So his father and brother went over. He did see the horse first. But they purchased the horse. When he got out of the service, he purchased half interest in him. And that's the way it was.
And at that time, I guess they bought the horse for $600,
Yes.
which was...
Quite a fee at that time.
He came to Jerry's dad's place then,
Right.
as a yearling.
Yes.
And their plans were just to have him as a family horse, or...
I believe, to begin with, that's all it was. But of course, they got into raising them afterwards, so...
Upon his return from World War II and following his marriage to Anne, Jerry bought out George Merritt's share of Allen's Major, and Major came to live with Jerry and Anne in Auburn, New York. Major was originally acquired by the Ashby family to serve as a riding horse, and there were never grand plans of showing or breeding Major. For fun, Jerry did show Major nearby in Syracuse, Buffalo, and other regional events under both Western and English tack. As he matured, it was by word of mouth that talk of the spirited black stallion spread, and people came to seek out this fine Morgan. Here, Anne and Donna talk about Major, covering topics from his big show at Harrisburg, with some commentary by Aileen Richards, on through his ability to adapt to riding lessons with the children. As Anne and Donna say, Major was a proud horse with animation and extreme presence. You couldn't help but notice him. At the same time, put a bunch of Ashby kids on his back, and he'd walk on eggshells, and when one or two little Ashbys slid off his back, he'd stop in his tracks and plant his feet.
Black. He was registered as a dark chestnut, which they later changed to dark brown, seal brown. But he did have the brown on the muzzle and the flanks. But he looked black. I mean, especially when he was shined up to be shown. Well, he was shown at Harrisburg and Erie County Fair, and Buffalo International, and most of the Syracuse shows. And that was about it.
Major had been, local, some of the local shows and siring lots of good stuff. I kept saying that you really should be showing out against some of these horses. So somehow or other, those two brothers got the courage to come to Harrisburg. And, of course, that's the first time they went in the ring. Annie Hale and everybody else, they're drooling over the rail at this thing. And these kids, these boys, they're dressed like Pasofino riders half the time. The Pasofino riders ride in business suits and things like that. I think this is the way I remember it. But what they came out there, and Alan Major, a great big snorty horse that looks like he's performing on cocaine or something, and he's not. He is out there scaring the devil out of everybody else and doing it perfectly, and the most beautiful big black horse you ever saw in your life.
That must have been Bob and Jerry when they were quite, because they weren't very old at that time. I think Jerry was about 31. It was the first time he was shown, actually. I guess he had been shown at Erie County before that, but most of the Morgan people hadn't seen him before that particular show. Everybody liked him, because they said, I forget who won. I think Oracle Leader was there. Because he was pinned first, but they said he got an ovation that beat Oracle and Leaders when they pinned him.
He had that type of presence, though. Such presence, and then...
Well, you can see it right in that
especially
picture.
with Dad. But when the kids, when we were kids, it was, and we got on his back, he was a completely different horse. He was like, he would walk on eggshells. I mean, he was so gentle.
Even in the show ring, he knew what he was there for. But when the kids were on his back, you could trust him. And if one of them slid off, he'd stop right there. I did.
You know, I think most of us learned to ride on him.
Yes, everybody but me, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
Because Brian was born the year that we put Major down.
Yeah.
He took him down to Cornell once for just a physical, I think. Because one of the vets that was down there said he never forgot that horse getting off the trailer. He said you just didn't see anything else around when he got off. He was proud. It's a very proud horse.
He was a lot of horse. He was just a lot of horse. And we had a lot of Major, but I mean, we had years and years of a barn full and a pasture full of horses, too. You know, and they were all like that. He did have, a lot of his offspring had the same qualities. The presence and the animation.
But they were still gentle.
But the gentleness, the dispositions, and the willingness to just want to do.
That's what we liked about his line, particularly, is the disposition. They were all good, easy keepers.
There's lots to cover when discovering the contributions of Major as a breeding stallion, but first it's important to remember that he was seen as a member of the Ashby family. There are plenty of stories that illustrate how intelligent and good-natured Major was. Next, you'll hear how Major ran away from home and hid from Jerry during his travels. You'll hear about his pal Ginger the dog and how he liked to chase the cows.
We lived down where the motel is in Syracuse right now.
In Weedsport.
In Weedsport, on the corner. And Jerry used to ride back along the railroad track and over to Nelson's on Oakland Road. He had to cross the track at the bridge. Well, he got loose one day and he started up the trail, so Jerry figured, well, he's going over there, because that's where he rode him all the time, and they had mares. So he took off running, and Jerry got in the car and figured he'd get to the bridge and head him off, or get a hold of him. He got to the bridge and the horse was nowhere in sight, and he drove on to Nelson's and he wasn't there. But when he came back, the horse, in the meantime, had gone on over there. He got home and he got a telephone call. It was from a woman that lived down the road, and she had watched him. She says, "Your horse is over to Jerry's." He said, so he hid behind the bushes when he saw Jerry's car. Jerry must have been standing on the bridge or something like that. He just stopped and stood behind the bushes until he got in the car and went. Then he followed. He was definitely his horse. I mean, like I said in the article, he well, I guess it was another article, he tolerated me. But when sometimes he would just turn his back on me and go in the corner and ignore me when I came out. But with Jerry, he was always there. Well, he enjoyed the trails as much as anything.
We always had a cow to milk, and once in a while the cow would get loose. Dad would saddle up Major to go after the cow when it got loose. When that cow saw Major coming, she'd hightail it back to the barn.
Now, what did Major think of the cows?
Well,
He was
he
fine.
enjoyed, yeah, he enjoyed going after him.
I
It was
remember one
time to get out.
Jerry took off. Some people down in Weedsport had lost a herd, actually, that got loose. And they called him up to come down and help round them up. So he rounded cattle, too.
When Dad went for a trail ride with Major, Ginger was with him. She always was with him.
That was Ginger. She used to she used to run in and out between his feet as they were going. He never stepped on her. How? I don't. She was really could maneuver pretty good too, but he had to.
Allen's Major was 14.3 hands. He was foaled in 1943, and with the exception of one season, where he stood at Morrow Hills Farm in Wisconsin, he always lived with a member of the Ashby family. He sired 45 Morgans, including 12 stallions, 26 mares, and 7 geldings. His first foal was Ginger Mildan out of Ruthven's Mildred Ann in 1954, and she went on to be one of the foundation broodmares for the Long family, and it was out of this mare that they had My Lady Donna, dam of Windhover, Enchantment, Windhover, Enchantress, and Just a Dream. His next foal in 1956 was Major Mildan, again out of Ruthven's Mildred Ann, and this stallion sired 6 offspring, and you'll find him in the pedigree of Beam's Nighthawk. In 1957 there was Awatka Select Lass out of Awatka My Lass, and Awatka Select Lad out of Townshend Lady Selectafield. Lass was one of the foundation mares for Marlene Barron's B.L. Morgans, and her foals included Selecchio, foundation mare at Roman Acres, including Roman Crusader, and B.L. Anticipation. You'll find her behind many of Robert and Roberta Marshall's Seaway Morgans. Ladd helped put 25 foals on the ground. Other significant major offspring include Major's Nubbin in 1957. She was the dam of Meredith Bilirubin and Reigate Major. Hiker Joy in 1966. That was a stallion with 76 foals to his credit, and many of the early Ransomvale Morgans. In 1958, Major's Lass was foaled, and her foal in 1961 introduced the first Ashwood prefix Morgan, Ashwood Don Lynn. In 1962, 64, and 66, she produced 3 other Ashwood foals, and was then sold sight unseen to Marilyn Childs. Her 4th foal was the Statesman. Lippet Mandate was the sire, and he went on to make quite a name for himself with 87 Morgan offspring to his credit. Next we'll be able to listen to Anne talk about Major's Lass, her offspring, and coming up with the Ashwood farm name.
Major's Lass was actually the first one we had here.
Okay, all right.
And then we got the Ashwood prefix. Actually, I think Marion Wright and Barbara Cole came here. And in their travels, Marilyn had told them to look for an old-type Morgan. And we had Major's Lass for sale at that time. She was in foal to Diebury Billy at the time. Anyway, Barbara told Marilyn about the horse, and I don't think Marilyn even saw her before she bought her. She just went on Barbara Cole's word. And Jerry delivered her to Tunbridge, because he was talking about he had a high trailer at the time, and he couldn't get under the bridge that went up to it was a covered bridge. So I don't know exactly what they did, but he said he just couldn't get up the hill or something to the farm. She was a good producer. And actually she was a nice kid's horse too.
Was it Major's Lass that went on to have the Statesman, I
Yes.
think?
Mm-hmm.
And that was
That was Marilyn Child's first foal by her, and then she sold her to Barbara Simmons
got it. Now, what does Ashwood stands for? Ashby.
in Underwood.
Come
That was
from?
my maiden name. We just combined the two names.
A quick note about the importance of Allen's Major on the Ransomvale Morgans. Of Major's 12 had the Ransomvale prefix, and 3 were named by Dr. Bachman after football players Hiker Joy, Bucky Hogan, and Bill Pritchard. Here you can listen to Anne share her thoughts on the Morgans and the Bachmans.
At the beginning, it was Marge Hens and her husband and her sons that showed all the horses for Dr. Bachman. Then Harry Embry came in, well, several years later.
And at that point, these mares probably came and stayed with you for a while. It wasn't like the fancy stuff that we do now.
They stayed here quite a while because Dorothy laughed one time. Somebody asked him how they could leave all their horses at home and go to the Northampton every year. And she said, it's easy. We just take them down to Ashby's to be bred.
Now, was Dr. Bachman, did somebody tell me that for a while he used to name his horses after
football players?
Bucky Hogan, yeah. Who were some of the other ones? Yeah.
I think most of his Hiker Joy was because he played football, whether it was in college or high school, I don't know which, but these were all teammates of his, I guess.
Yeah.
So Hiker Joy's name came because of football?
A football player, yeah. Hiker Joy and Bucky Hogan, Bill Pritchard.
For many years, it was the Snook family and daughters Sherry and Wendy that were always in the ribbons at our New York shows. The J.J. Morgan program, Super J prefix, started with a shared ride home from work between Joan and Anne. Listen to Joan tell the story of meeting Allen's Major and how she traded beef for her first Morgan, Ashwood Rob Allen.
It must have been in '69 that I think we moved to our farm in '67 or '68, and we had probably 4 or 5 different breed horses. We had Appaloosa, and the ponies, and kids were like 7 and under. And I was working at GE in Auburn, and I met Ann there, and she was also working, and we had the night shift, and we got to talking, and her husband had to bring her to work every night and go pick her up. Well, I went right by her house, so we got to talking, and I said, no, you can ride with me, and so naturally her with horses and me with horses, we talk horses, and she told us of the Morgans, and I didn't even know what a Morgan was. So I've heard of them, but I'd never really seen one. And we had just got started into the horses, just a year or 2 before that, so everything was new to me. So anyways, she invited us to come and see Allen's Major. Well, I wanted to do it when my husband could come with me. So they lived about, say, 4 or 5, maybe 3 or 4 miles from us. And so one, Saturday or Sunday afternoon we went, and we waited outside while Jerry got Allen's Major, and he came out so magnificently with his head up and his tail and calling to all the girls, and we were blown away. I mean, wow, this is a Morgan? And we just wanted one so bad, and they had Rob, a little colt. He was 5 months old. Well, just starting the farm and just starting with horses, money was tight, so we traded. I can't remember exactly what, but it was some beef that we had raised. I don't remember how many, either 1 or 3 or something like that. We traded for Rob. That's how we got Rob, the 5-month-old colt.
Oh my gosh.
And we were just so excited. He was registered, our first registered horse, and we were so excited. The following year, we got into showing in hand, because me or my husband, we didn't ride, for shows, and we were just kind of trail riders, and we started showing them in hand, and we had a lot of fun doing that, and then we started going to some of the bigger shows, the A shows, and he would place. Of course, we were very novice, didn't know, but Jerry and Ann helped us immensely. When we had people coming out and we would go get them in the barn, he would do the same thing. He would come out of the barn and he'd be like, he was little, he was only 14 too, but he would look like he's 17 hands when he came out of that barn. He had the same attitude as Major did. And, we started showing him in harness and under saddle. And remember, Sherry was 13 years old and her first Class A show in the Coliseum. And the ring, it was when the classes were so full, like there were 38 horses in the ring. And here's this little 13-year-old, never shown in the Coliseum, a stallion. Oh. And he came in just like he came out of the barn. Look at me. And everybody noticed him. He always had that attitude. Look at me. I'm here. You look at me.
I remember the first time the Snooks had him down. I think he was about 4 years old at the mortgage show. And we were talking to Jeannie Herrick at the time. And she was talking right along, and all of a sudden she stopped. Who's that horse? He attracted a lot of attention, too.
One of Allen's Major's sons, Ashwood Majestic, out of Lippet, Georgiana, demonstrated much of what made his sire so special, and he can be credited with 32 foals of his own. Here, listen to Anne talk about what made Majestic so special.
It was Ashwood Majestic. Okay. His Major's son, we kept him for years, too. So.
Gosh, until he died, yeah.
Well, Majestic was the one we kept here, and he was very much like Major. We could drive him, you could ride him. He loved to go on a trail ride. He loved to be driven. That's what we liked about his line, particularly, is the disposition. They were all good, easy keepers, and there was some that he really hated to sell, but sometimes you'd get so many horses, you had to sell what people wanted.
I used to say the only way I can keep them is to hide them.
That's true, because if you had one that you thought was special, usually the people that came in did too.
Ashwood Jess's Pride, foaled in 1972, sired 19 Morgan foals. He was out of Ashwood Majestic by Ransomvale Bridget, and Ashwood Willie B. was foaled in 1974, again out of Ashwood Majestic by Ashwood Sarah Lee. They were two other stallions that also typified the Allen's Major disposition. Here you can listen to Donna talk about Willie B. and how they were all like that.
Willie, I had Willie for a number of years, and Willie was kept a stallion.
Ashwood Willie B. This
and
one.
He's right here. But he was so sweet. I mean, when my grandchildren were around, when I had them, he'd be out in the yard, and they'd go up, and he'd drop his head so they could hug his head. So they all had that.
Anne and Donna say that there were 3 horses in Jerry's life that he enjoyed for the pure joy of moving along in a strong trot on a daily trail ride. First there was Allen's Major, then Ashwood Majestic, and finally Ashwood Sonnen, a grandson of Major's. Here Lee Semeloff, who acquired Sonnen later in his life, talks about this horse and meeting Jerry.
The horse was magnificent. I mean, it was everything you would think a Morgan horse should be. And he had such presence about him, and about him that you just couldn't resist. It's just very majestic, very, he was the king and you were the commoner. I spoke to Gerald Ashby about the horse because after I got him going with a driving trainer, because that's what I wanted to do. And the horse had been Gerald Ashby's favorite trail horse, but he had the most gorgeous trot you can imagine. I mean, he had, if you look at the old-style park horses, not the over the wrist type of trot, the ones you see now looks more like a hackney, but he was level, but he would pick himself up and just pull his legs underneath him and carry himself, and it was just magnificent to watch him trot down the road pulling a carriage. I took him to Walnut Hill. I mean, I really didn't know much about driving at the time, and probably if I knew more, I wouldn't have shown him the way I did. We couldn't go into a class because every time he entered a class, he thought he was supposed to go out on the rail and race everything. And we actually got asked to be excused a couple times because he just wouldn't walk. And, you know, he was not a sedate carriage horse, but he won almost every obstacle class he ever entered. You couldn't beat him, and he was agile. And I ran into the Ashbys for the first time at the Lorenzo driving competition. They were there just watching and came up to me after, and because they recognized the name in the program, and he'd taken me right out of the novice division because we won both the timed obstacle and I can't remember if it was progressive obstacles or the other class, but I mean, he just flew through them. He beat standardbreds. You know, so they came up, and then later on I brought him back over to their house, and you know, Gerald Ashby gave me a lot of background on him. You know, told me he'd been a trail horse, and once the horse saw Gerald, he just relaxed and remembered everything. You know, it was just wonderful to see. I mean, this horse loved that man. This horse was a grandson of a stallion called Portledge Stephen, who I found out later from some other people, he'd been a very famous trotting Morgan up in Vermont area or Massachusetts, who raced against standardbreds and beat them.
If you've a New York bred Morgan, there's a good chance that somewhere in its pedigree you'll find some connection to Alan's Major. You'll have the Ashby family to thank for that. Their love of the horse for all those characteristics that we treasure as Morgan, presence, animation, kind disposition, inquisitive nature, are what led them to produce several generations of Ashwood Morgans that many of us were blessed to enjoy. In this final clip, we'll close with Anne's story of her special riding experience, which is a fun note, followed by a bittersweet memory of Jerry riding daily up through his 70s and the special spring bouquet of flowers he'd bring home for his lovely wife.
He loved to ride. That was I think he rode right up till he was about 78, and he just couldn't wait to get on the horse in the spring.
He had Jenny's half brother Sonnen at that time.
At that time, yeah.
And so he would ride Sonnen, and I would ride Jenny. And have a trotting race.
So you used to have trotting races with your dad?
Well, because they both went, really well. They went together. They were similar in size and similar in the way they went, so that was, you know, he'd always want to have a trotting race somewhere along the way.
He always wanted a horse. He always enjoyed a horse that had a lot of get up and go, he said.
Yeah.
I rode a few times. I can't say I'm a rider. I just got on the horse, and I had a couple bad experiences with the Pandy's Juanita was one of them. I was at Earl Langley's, and she was a great horse, but so they figured she was a safe one for me to ride. And Earl's daughter and Earl and Jerry were on the horses, and they got Panty's Juanita out for me to ride. New Woodstock has got lots of hills around it. Got to the top of the hill, and we just stood there while we turned the horses around towards the barn. The minute they turned towards the barn, Panty's Juanita decided she was going. She had a foal in the barn. Probably the foal was calling, I don't know, but all I did was hang on. It seemed like the longest ride. There's actually, in Jerry's life, there was just 3 horses that he rode. He rode others, but there was 3 that when he went on a trail, he would take Major, then it was Majestic, and then it was Sonnet. Those 3, and were his favorites. They were the type of horse he liked, and
rode
almost every day sometimes.
When the weather was right.
As he got older, it wasn't that often.
Tell him about the flowers that he used to pick. How did you get back on the horse?
He got so it was hard for him to get on the horse.
Because of his knees.
So he had to use a bale of hay to mount the horse before he left. He came every spring. He used to bring me back spring flowers. He'd ride through the woods and he'd bring back a bouquet of flowers. Well, this as he got older, and I knew he was having a hard time getting on and off, I finally asked him one day. I said, how did you get back on the horse? You had to get off him to pick those flowers." He just grinned and he says, "I put him down in the ditch."